Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining today's session focused on grant writing developed for the Acute Care Research Unit Training Program. Before we begin, let's take a look at the workshop goals. We'll define what grant writing is, explore the fundamentals of grantsmanship, identify the audience and purpose of grant writing, as well as discover the major elements of a research proposal, and then discuss examples of ACRU proposals, grants, and funded projects. Today's workshop will be divided into four main sections: the introduction section to grant writing, the art of grantsmanship, the grant proposal process, as well as what the post-award phase might look like. For the introduction section, what is grant writing? What is a grant? What is a contract or an agreement? We'll also take a look at other key terms that you may encounter during the grant writing process, as well as explore what the project lifecycle might look like. Grant writing. Grant writing is the practice of completing an application process for a financial grant provided by an institution. These institutions may include a government department, corporations, foundations, or a trust. A grant includes funds or other property awarded by a sponsor to achieve a specific goal. It also entails obligations to a sponsor. Keep in mind that these obligations might be less stringent compared to those in a contract. In addition, a grant generally is construed to allow greater discretion compared to a contract in the conduct of research and to provide less specificity in the definition of an intended outcome of the research. While a grant is not as exacting in its provisions, keep in mind you must treat it with the same respect as a contract. What is a contract or an agreement? A contract or an agreement involves a promise or a set of promises for which the performance is recognized as a legal obligation. Each contract typically contains something called a statement of work. A statement of work is a description of the services to be provided by the university or the contractor. The work statement must be drafted with great care because failure by the university or the contractor to deliver the results anticipated or to perform what is defined in the statement of work is considered a breach of contract. In addition, an agreement can be defined as a specific work statement supported by funds from a sponsor who exercises more control than in the case of a grant. Now that we've briefly discussed the grant writing process as well as what a grant, contract, or an agreement are, let's take a look at the grant proposal and submission. The grant application process is referred to as the grant proposal or the grant submission. This is a written description of a project that is presented to a sponsor. In addition, a federal proposal may include cost estimates, subject to the provisions of federal cost accounting standards. What about an award? An award results when a proposal is funded by a sponsor and that sponsor issues a grant, contract, or cooperative agreement with the university. When an award is granted by a sponsor, the research process and work typically begins. Now it's time to set up the project and begin managing it through completion or closeout. Let's take a look at other key terms you might also encounter during the grant writing process. These terms may include call for applications, call for proposals, conflict of interest, a co-investigator, the data use agreement, funding opportunity announcements, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act or HIPAA, the Institutional Review Board, letters of commitment, letters of intent, letters of support, as well as the project director, protected health information, the principal investigator, as well as requests for applications and requests for proposals. For additional key terms, you may visit the University of Michigan Office of Research and Sponsored Projects glossary. Let's take a look at the ORSP project lifecycle. The beginning phases are also called the pre-award phases. This includes in red, gold, as well as blue. In red, it's the finding funding process phase. You'll want to make sure that you find opportunities and proposals that are in line with your research interests and goals. Once you find the funding opportunity, you're going to develop the proposal. This phase is what we are trying to focus on for the majority of today's workshop. Once you develop the proposal, you'll want to route and submit the proposal to the reviewers. We'll discuss the later phases of the project lifecycle later today. And this will include setting up the project, managing the project, as well as closing out the project. In this next section of the workshop, let's talk a little bit about the art of grantsmanship. What is grantsmanship? What are the different types of funding? What is the grant audience? What is the grant purpose? As well as essential tips to consider. Grantsmanship. Grantsmanship is the art of acquiring financial grants through the process of grant writing. This term is typically used to refer to the skills necessary to secure peer-reviewed research funding, but keep in mind it can also apply to more broad fundraising opportunities. This may include fundraising from private foundations, community foundations, corporate foundations, governments, as well as other grant makers. Let's discuss a little bit about the different types of funding opportunities. First, there are federal, state, and local government agencies. Funding might come from the National Institutes of Health, or NIH, the National Science Foundation, or NSF, as well as at the state and local government levels. This might include the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services or the Washtenaw County Health Department. Funding may also come from foundations, corporations, nonprofit organizations, as well as professional organizations. These may include the Emergency Medicine Foundation, the Michigan Health Endowment Fund, Michigan Medicine, or the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute, or PCORI. Let's also talk a little bit about the grant audience. Who are the sponsors of the grant? What is the mission, the vision, as well as interests of the funding organization? You'll also want to pay attention to whether a program officer exists. If so, you'll want to identify them and contact them. For the grant purpose, what is the purpose of the grant proposal? What are the specific goals and objectives of the proposal? And then you want to ensure the proposed objectives are aligned with the sponsor's missions and goals. I've compiled some essential tips for you to consider. You'll want to develop a timeline to keep track of all of the different proposal components. You want to ensure that you follow all of the various guidelines set out by the sponsors. Respond directly to the funder priorities. It may be also helpful to understand the review process. How might your proposal be scored? Who will be reviewing your proposal? Next, you'll want to provide supporting evidence regarding the issue and significance, as well as the likelihood of project success. What is the need? Why is it important? What is the objective? And what is the methodology? And last but not least, adequately describe competence, expertise of the team, as well as resources. For these components, you want to develop a strong justification to convince the reviewers. The next phase of this workshop, let's take a look at the grant proposal. What are the components of a research proposal? And how might you apply for other types of grants? This is the general research proposal outline. Depending on the research proposal, it may contain a cover letter, it will have a title page, an abstract or summary, the table of contents, the background or significance section, the project purpose, a plan of approach, as well as references, institutional resources, a budget, and then the appendices, as well as the bio sketches. So what is a cover letter? A cover letter usually is an optional letter used to convey information that is pertinent to the review of the proposal. Since this is optional, it typically depends on the overall need and purpose of your cover letter, as well as whether or not the sponsors allow for a cover letter. Next is the title page. You want to make sure the title is clear, concise, and contains keywords regarding the proposed study. Make sure to distinguish your title page from other types of research. For the abstract or summary, this serves as a concise summary of the proposal and includes the significance or need. It also includes the hypothesis or objectives, the methods, as well as an overall impact of the research. Next, you want to make sure to include a table of contents. This requirement depends on the proposal, but it may also include lists of figures, tables, as well as acronyms. For the background or significance section, it describes relevant work in the field and identifies any gaps in knowledge or need through support from literature reviews. There's also the project purpose. This section will contain the aims, and there are usually 2 to 4 outcome objectives of the proposal, describing what will be accomplished or tested. For your plan of approach, the section will refer to the research design, and this may include analytical methods, data evaluation, as well as a timeline and project workflow. This may be broken down into different phases connected to each of the aims. In addition, you may want to include references. The reference list where the bibliographical style may depend on the specific field of research. So you want to make sure you use the right style. This may include AMA format or APA format, among others. For institutional resources, this section contains the available resources to the proposed research. It will include subject matter expertise, facilities utilized, equipment or instruments, as well as collaborating institutions. For the budget section, it will provide a line item justification associated with various research expenses. The proposed expenses may include salaries, equipment, materials, travel, services, as well as other miscellaneous costs. And then last but not least, you'll want to include appendices and bio sketches. The appendices, if allowed, may include letters of support, informed consents, as well as other research protocol. For the bio sketches, this section is dedicated primarily for investigators to highlight their expertise and experience following specific formats and templates. Now that we've discussed the outline of a research proposal, what about other types of grants? So aside from research grants, other funding opportunities may include academic program proposals, private foundation inquiries, pilot studies, research, training, and career development grants, small business grants, as well as small internal organization grants. Depending on the type of grant, you'll want to make sure you follow all of the different requirements set out by the sponsors. In the final part of today's workshop, let's talk a little bit about the post-award phase. What might next steps look like after you've developed and submitted your proposal? What is it going to look like once you get an award? We'll share with you some ACRU examples as well as additional resources. Earlier, we discussed the beginning phases of the project life cycle. Let's take a look at the award start and completion phases. These last three phases are typically called the post-award phase. It includes setting up a project, managing a project, as well as closing out the project. These are phases in which you want to make sure all of the different objectives and aims, as well as the timeline listed in your proposal, are completed. For more information, visit the University of Michigan Office of Research and Sponsored Projects. I've included some examples of ACRU-funded projects for you on this slide. You'll see that there are various federal, state, as well as nonprofit organization fundings. It includes NIH, the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute study called Enhancing Pre-Hospital Outcomes for Cardiac Arrest, or other studies from the EMF Foundation, Michigan Medicine, Mid-Michigan Health, the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, among others. If you're interested in learning more about different types of ACRU-funded projects, feel free to visit the Acute Care Research Unit Project website. And finally, I've provided some additional grant writing resources from the Office of Research for you. This will be helpful for the pre-proposal planning, as well as proposal development. Thank you so much for joining today's workshop.